One of the most common questions I got in 1.0 is if you don't have a 5-star shielder, for example like Gepard, or a 5-star healer like Bailu, does that mean you're kinda hard stuck because you can't progress through the Memory of Chaos if you're maybe only left with, for example, a free-to-play healer like Natasha and your other shielder is Fire MC who doesn't really offer much of a strong shield? But don't worry, in this video I'll actually be sharing with you my tips and tricks on how you can actually build 2 teams to progress through the Memory of Chaos, and the secret trick that I have as well that you can progress with just the 3 units Natasha as well as Fire MC. Now the trick to this really is a character like March 7. One thing that a lot of people are not focusing on is right now in 1.0, enemies have very low effect resistance. For those of you who haven't explored her kit in detail, what she does in her ultimate is she actually has a very strong ability to freeze in an AoE fashion. Her technique ability also lets you start the battle off freezing the enemies, and you can taunt or redirect straight away so your other characters don't take much damage as well. You will have this bonus ability that you want to level when you can. It's not super urgent to level, you can still do without it for most of the earlier floors, but as you venture on later, you want this reliability to increase. 15% is massive, especially once you push this towards a 65 chance of freeze in an AoE fashion. And not only that, I'm also running here, ignore these quantum damage, I'm just using it for the main stat, but I'm actually running a Pan-Galactic Commercial Enterprise, something that gives effect hit rate for March 7, and as you can see, if I just go into my main stats over here, you can see that I'm actually running a very nice amount of effect hit rate of about 26% effect hit rate to increase the chance of freezing the enemies as well. So that is how I work around. Instead of just thinking one direction where you just want to heal or tank, you want to crowd control the enemies to prevent them from even moving in the first place, meaning that you don't even take much damage. And even if some of the damage goes through, which there are quite a bit of damage, the tactic that I'm going to be sharing with you now, in terms of how I gear the rest of their kit, in terms of your one team, which is going to be March 7 and Fire MC, and your second team is going to be Natasha, which is enough to sustain the second team on her own. What I will actually do is I will be running March 7 with a defense light cone here. And some of you might be wondering, why am I using this? It's because of the sustain that it gives. I don't really care too much of the stat here. She's mainly used as a crowd control, aggro redirect, and a bit of a shielder. But more importantly, you don't want her to die in the process of whatever she's doing because of splash damage. She will likely be in the corner together with Fire MC. So in a team composition, Fire MC will be at the leftmost side. March 7 will be taking the center left slot as well. So you don't want her to die from the attrition damage, you want her to sustain herself, and this works very nicely. Another thing that you want to do with Fire MC is, ideally if you have the light cone, you want to gear Fire MC with Landau's Choice. Now a lot of you might be wondering, this is very strange because most people will actually be running Day 1 of My New Life, which gives damage reduction for the whole team and a bit of stats for your character. One of the biggest downsides of Day 1 of My New Life is a strategic downside. You only use a damage reduction for your whole team when your whole team is expected to take damage. In this team composition where you're crowd controlling the enemy and redirecting all the damage to one side because of taunt and stuff like that, you don't really care too much about overall team-wide damage reduction. Rather, you want your main tank to have as much damage reduction as you can to be able to sustain the floor. Of course, Fire MC is very chunky, already has a lot of damage reduction in her kit as well. If we go into the traces here, you can see even at level 4 it's already a 43% damage reduction. If you add on Landau's Choice on top of that, it's going to be a much more significant damage reduction. Plus, together with March 7 shield, she will hardly be taking any damage. In the clip later, I'll also be showing that she really doesn't take too much damage in the earlier floors, especially if you use this double up combo quite well. Landau's Choice also allows you to draw aggro, and which means that if you start the match and, for example, one of the enemies moves faster than both of your tanks, at least the chances of them hitting, for example, Fire MC will be significantly higher. And if you really don't have Landau's Choice, and then I would direct myself towards a Day 1 of My New Life. It's still okay, just that I think Landau's Choice is better in terms of this team composition. And other than that, really any preservation light cone likely will work. You could even use another one of defense if you really wanted a bit more sustain as well. Your tanks here are just going to be aiming to redirect the aggro and nothing too much more than that. Of course, I'm just building Fire MC with a bit more tankability as well. I think the most important thing is you want to run a defense boot instead of a speed boot. And the reason why I'm running a defense boot is if your Fire MC moves slower, which means that her taunt lasts longer in terms of the time that she puts up her skill. Because if she moves faster, means that the uptime that you have on this skill ability and this damage reduction is theoretically lesser as your characters take more turns as well. So when you have this damage reduction in your kit, you are able to mitigate a lot of damage for a longer period of time, meaning you don't have to use your skill points too often, and running a defense boot would then actually be a net positive in terms of the amount of skill points it gives your entire team. And now let's go ahead and take a look in terms of what this looks like in action. Okay, so as we can see, the moment we enter the battle, as long as you set your right team composition in the right places, for example here we can see that we set the ice into an ice weakness enemy, meaning we are much able to freeze the enemies much better. So I'm going to just show you how the team composition goes. So straight up, first thing we want to do is we'll put the shield on Fire MC to redirect the aggro. March 7 is able to counter and take out a lot of ice weaknesses, and as you can see, Fire MC does have quite a huge amount of damage reduction in her kit, and this burn doesn't really affect her because when she has an enhanced state, she does heal up as well a little bit. So as you can see, even after the first wave, Fire MC is not taking any damage because of the huge shield that March 7 provides. Now I'm going to show you the CC chance. Whenever you break an enemy with ice, you also will freeze them, so that's a very nice bonus of ice characters as well. But let's take a look at this center unit. With the effect hit rate, I hope this is going to be a guaranteed freeze, but it's not. I think that's a fantastic example of showing you how even with effect hit rate, sometimes it won't work, but more often than not it does crowd control quite a bit. And for example, in situations where the boss is still moving, you can just simply rinse and repeat, shield up, give that huge amount of protection to your units as well. So as you can see, the splash damage is going on March 7, but because she has the defense light cone, she can easily heal it up later on, so I'm not really too worried about her. And meanwhile, your support attack buffer and your DPS is just doing tons of damage in this stage as well. At any point your characters here, for example, let's say Esther is falling a bit too low, maybe with this burn, I can easily also cleanse it up together with March 7 shield right here. Although she does draw a bit of aggro here, this is offset with Fire MC's taunting ability. So I'll just show you the demonstration, I'll just taunt it. So as you can see, that's a demonstration of Fire MC's taunt is actually overriding, for example, if you needed to emergency shield a unit and they are drawing aggro. For example here, of course, the character is above 30% HP or 50% HP, which means they still draw aggro, but most of the time when you really need to shield a unit that's dropping too low, they also don't draw any aggro to themselves, because that's how March 7's kit works in general. So the idea here is you want to clear the floor. A lot of the floors tend to be, doesn't matter how stacked your DPS are and how over leveled they are, if you can't even sustain through the main floor and make it towards the second unit, where for example now at least I have Natasha here in this set, I will argue that this is like the easiest set to go by because you already have a healer in this comp. You can run a lot more versatile team compositions as well, as long as your characters are slightly decently well built. One thing to note is, of course, the Natasha team comp generally demands your characters to be of higher level, because without an aggro drawing character in your roster means that you will split the damage evenly across a lot of them, and that's how Natasha likes to work. She likes to heal up the whole party and the damage needs to be shared across the board. One character I like to run together with Natasha would definitely be Esther. Esther speeds up the whole team, meaning that every character takes more actions. Natasha also takes more actions because she moves faster as well, and I do like the combo of Esther as well as Natasha. And you generally want to run two other characters who are relatively chunkier, quite independent, and don't mind taking damage because there isn't a dedicated shielder as well. So characters, for example, like Arlen, like Yanqing might not do very well in this team composition. So that's just some things to point out. And if you found this video helpful in terms of seeing how we actually manage with just one healer, go ahead and try it out yourself as well, and let me know in the comments below whether you found these tips very helpful. Thank you so much for watching. Do check out these two other videos right here, and see you in the next video.